Again, I considered all travail and every right work that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool folds his hands together and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, For whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he has not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So, of course, as we get into chapter 4, we remind ourselves that Solomon is basically spouting off a bunch of frustration. Frustration from his observances in life, his observances of everything under the sun, and he's losing sight of everything that's above the sun, which is God, his throne, and eternity. And without those things, you and I would also view life and the world exactly like this. But having those things, we see these various trials, difficulties, and sufferings that he expresses throughout the book in a different light. And we can see that every part of life, indeed every life, has purpose. And we kind of opened the book by stating all of that. And here he kind of goes on into more things. And I really believe that this section, verses 1 through 12, we can kind of see this as a problem of loneliness, and then the solution to that problem, which is to be friendly, okay, to have friends, to have relationships. So it's really kind of reminding us of the need of companionship. And often throughout Ecclesiastes, Solomon will give a problem without a solution. But there are those moments where he will kind of just briefly, almost as if it's like an interlude, there will be a suggestion or a reference to some kind of encouragement, and he might even invoke God and his name throughout the book time and again. Well, here we find it starting with this verses 1 through 3 talking about oppression and oppressors. And so it says, So I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done, again, under the sun. Wonderful to note as we sit on a kind of a, we enjoy more knowledge. We understand what is coming more than Solomon did. We understand about the resurrection way better than any Old Testament saint could have, because we have the New Testament to illuminate and elucidate those things to us. But just consider oppressions and oppressive rulers and dictators, or perhaps even some of the oppressiveness that exists even in this so-called free country from its government, because there are some oppressive things even within a free country, even in America, okay, which is said to be the most free nation on earth. There's oppressiveness, there's corruption, there's abuse of power, and there's people who wield their power to control and to extort and to just wield authority over people and to put people down instead of lift people up. Oppression exists wherever power exists and wherever men possess that power. It's just a fact of life. And in fact, that's exactly how he states it. He states it so coldly and so matter of fact that he doesn't even offer any kind of hope for that kind of situation. It is just a reality of life. Get used to it. He says it is better, therefore, to have never been born at all. The unborn have it better than those who experience such oppression. Now, he could only witness the oppression. He surely never experienced it. He is the king. He ruled over everything. Solomon, the writer here, the preacher, the Koheleth, he himself never experienced oppression, yet he observed it, and he could see the tyranny of it, and he could see the suffering of the people that are under the oppressor. And so he wrote about it. And what he said was this. It's very interesting that he kind of concludes this thought of the oppressor in this way. That, he says firstly that, he says, behold their tears. He states the lament of this situation. Look at their tears of the oppressed, and notice how they have no comforter. But then he says, the person who oppresses, they also don't have a comforter. They also are alone. They also are completely without companionship and friends. And truthfully, if you think of somebody who tries to control, who tries to domineer, who tries to rule over, people might pay them lip service, and on the outward they might kind of profess to interact and be friendly with this person, but on the inside, that's not a reality. They truly aren't friendly at all on the inside towards somebody who is oppressive. And they don't want to have anything to do. They want to come out from under. And on a very smaller scale, we might have had a boss that is oppressive to us, or perhaps even a professor in university, or a teacher in school that's just somehow they just have it out for you. And they like all the other kids, but they hated you. Or your boss likes all the other coworkers, but they have it out for you. And every little thing you do, even what you do right, you never really feel good about it because you're always worried it's going to be scrutinized and then pointed out, and you're going to be put down. And it's really just control, no matter what you do. And that is just a horrible existence. You feel every time you go home from that kind of work situation, you just feel like, man, I just got to get a new job. Yeah, the pay might be great, but I'll take 1,000 euros less a month for a better workplace, for a better work environment, for a better boss. I mean, let's face it, those are things that money can't buy. And also, power, money, this kind of oppressive and controlling behavior cannot buy or coerce into reality true relationship. And so the person who is oppressive finds himself all alone. I mean, let's just state one country, North Korea. I mean, they are a country that's alone, isolated, completely cut off from functioning with the rest of the world because of their oppressive regime. And so you look at that, and you might go to North Korea and ask any random person on the street, and I guarantee you any random person on the street would give you the same answer. Do you like what's his name, Kim Jong-un? And they would say yes, because they can't say anything else. Oh, we love him. He's awesome. But because if they were to say anything else, then they would be punished for it. And so truthfully, that man is alone. And no doubt, no comforter. He has to wonder, who has it out for me? Because no one really likes me. The interesting thing about the person who has absolute power is that you would think that one who has all of that power would use some of it for self-control and reform, and to change their ways from oppressing people to blessing people. You would think. But the paradox is that the person with power and control over others, they typically, because of the depravity of man, use it to harm and to oppress. And so the first thing he notes is the oppressor is, he causes just tyranny, and people have tears. It's horrible, suffering situation, but then at the same time, the oppressor himself suffers because he is alone. And then in verse 2 and 3, you get more of the lament. I praised the dead, which are already dead, because they don't have to put up with the tyranny anymore, right? More than the living, which are alive. It's better to be dead than alive than to suffer under oppressiveness. Verse 3 then, the lament continues. Yea, better is he that than both they, that is the living and the dead, which hath not yet been born. It's better never to even been born at all. To never have come into this world to experience the tyranny that's within it. Now, it's interesting. I can't remember the name of the movement, but I was checking the news today, as I unfortunately do daily, and on it was an interview of a lady that's a leader in some movement. She's from the UK, which is like against, and they're kind of, what do you say, they're they're promoting this lifestyle of not having children because of how horrible the world is, and how they, in their view, what I was getting from this is that it's almost an immorality and a selfishness to have children because of how horrible this world is, and why would you want to bring somebody into this world? I mean, to listen to this lady talk, she sounded like a hollow log. She sounded like a heartless person, and I couldn't believe my ears. But in fact, apart from Christ, and apart from the reality of eternity and the hope of heaven, truthfully, that will be a conclusion that people come to. I mean, that's just having a very natural, under the sun way of thinking. Look at this. Why would you want to put anybody through it? Oh, yeah, true. Good point. But you think, though, of what God said and how he gave the mandate for man and woman to go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. And he knew, obviously, of all of the troubles and tyrannical rulers that would come upon the face of the earth, yet he still said, go for it. In fact, when Israel was under the wicked regime and control of Egypt, they went from a tribal people to a full-fledged nation of people. From 70 some odd people to, some scholars estimate, as far up to 4 million people when they came out of Egypt. So just think about that. In that time of oppressiveness, they flourished as a people. And humans have a very interesting way of flourishing under extreme amounts of pressure. We actually seem to do worse when life is doing oh so well and we don't have to really fight for anything. We don't have to really strive to stay alive. And so we just kind of give up, and we become free floaters, and we seem to deteriorate. So, we know better. Solomon is just kind of looking at this as from an under the sun only perspective, and that's why he says something. This obviously is not true from a Christian New Testament perspective, but nonetheless, we can understand the lament. Now, verse 4, we see more things that would hinder good relationships. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. A man may strive, may work, and he ends up in a situation where he becomes competitive. So you have the oppressor, who obviously nobody wants to relate with him, and then you have the person who's competitive. And competitive people, especially if you're not a competitive person, are very difficult to get along with. I don't know, I would say I used to be more competitive than I am now. I think to be anti-competitive is not right either. I think it's good to have a little bit of, like, when you get into a sports situation, for instance, you don't want to just be out on the field, letting people score, because after all, it doesn't really matter. We're just out here for fun, and we're all winners. If everybody's a winner, then nobody's a winner. If everybody's a winner, that means everybody's a loser. So you can't think like that. And there's a very strong mindset being pushed on people today. In fact, a family member of mine was just in a violin competition, a national violin competition here in Finland. And they placed within the top 10 of Finland. But the way the competition was presented was that, like a normal competition, there's going to be a winner. But what they did was they took the top 10 and they lumped them all in one pile, and they didn't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They said that you're within the top 10. And then they split the pot 10 ways. Well, what's the point of competing? Well, they're young, and they don't really need to be learning this kind of competitiveness and all that. Listen, that kind of competitiveness is okay. Paul talks about it in the New Testament as well, that we should strive for mastery. We should strive to win. If you're in a competition, don't let your team down. Do your best. Go for it. If you're in it, be in it to win it, as they say. Don't just be in it because, it's we're all winners and we're just having fun. Okay, it's great. It's wonderful to have fun, but it's okay. It's okay to want to win. But here's where competitiveness becomes wrong, when it becomes envious. Notice the envy here. The right work of this man, he's really striving in envy to outdo his neighbor, to outperform, and to not be outperformed, to have the bigger, better, most extravagant looking house, and the perfectly manicured yard, and the white picket fence that never is dirty, but it's always gleaming in the sun because it's perfectly white and washed every day. The person who really just tries to show himself to be better than everybody around him through his hard work. And that person competing to be above people, that's different. Competing to win is not competing to be above people. You see, there's a difference. One has a heart of envy, the other just has a heart of doing really well what you're doing. And we should always want to do well what we're doing. But when you start to be envious, so much so that when you lose in your competition, you can't rejoice for the winner, then that's not right. And what do we call that? We call that poor sportsmanship. But equally so, it's poor sportsmanship to say that there can't be any first, second, third place. That's crazy. Because now we're not giving an atmosphere, now we're not providing a structure or a place for people to come and actually learn sportsmanship and learn what it's like to win and learn what it's like to lose and to deal with both in a very, how would you say, kind way, loving way. And so the person who competes in life and is competitive in life to simply be above his fellow neighbor, guess what? He's going to be a very lonely person. Because no one's going to want to get around him because it's always going to be like, you, me. You're going to tell a story and then he's going to come right behind you and follow that story up with a greater story. And it's always going to be like that. Because he always has to be on top of you. And he wants you to know it. So, you're going to be like, man, when can I go home? This guy's a me monster. I want to get out of here. So, then he talks about the fool in verse 5. The fool folds his hands together and eats his own flesh. It's like you first have the person who's so envious that at all times he's competing to be above other people, and then you have the complete polar opposite, the fool who does nothing. The what is it called? The complacent self-destructiveness of the lazy person. You might think that people might be really friendly, or how do you say? People might want to befriend somebody who's lazy, because let's face it, the lazy person's really not going to put a high expectation on that relationship. No strings attached. Doors open. Don't even have to close it when you leave. Just, whatever. Pretty easy going, right? And so people might gravitate towards that because there's not going to be an expectation placed on you from a lazy person. But truthfully, that's not the way it works, because if the person that you're wanting to relate to is lazy, you'll see really quickly that you'll be the only one investing in the friendship and relationship. It'll be one-sided, and you'll find you'll be bearing the burdens in it all by yourself. And so that person will be avoided. And truthfully, I wrote a quote here by Derek Kidner. I like this, speaking about the lazy person. His idleness eats away not only what he has, but what he is, eroding his self-control, his grasp of reality, his capacity for care, and, in the end, even his self-respect. And so that is the lazy person who folds his hands, his flesh will deteriorate. Then in verse 6, you have this going on from, where am I here? Verse 6. Yeah, then you have kind of an answer to both extremes. The guy who competes to get ahead and above everybody, and then the lazy, and then, well, how should we be, though? Verse 6, better is a handful with quietness than both hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. You see kind of a balance, right? Take what you can get and don't be miserable about what you didn't get. Just be content, so to speak. And of course, it also speaks to the peacefulness of this contentment, because, you're not going to be grabbing. Well, look at I was able to get this much with one hand, and I still have a whole empty hand. Maybe I can get two handfuls. And you're thinking how I can get more. No, don't, just listen. You don't have to worry about that. Whatever comes your way, just be blessed with it. Enjoy it. The answer to the imbalance of the other two kinds of people. And then, of course, the person who is completely living under the compulsion of needing to work, so much so that he is all alone because he's given himself to that end, just to work. He exists to work. In other words, it's not who I am for who I am, but it's I am what I do. And you identify with what you do. It's not who you are, it's what you do. In fact, it's interesting to note when you go to funerals, and I don't know how many funerals you've been to in your life. I've been to many. I don't remember a lot of them because when I was little, you just kind of look up and you don't really know what's going on. But then there are those that I have remembered, especially when people in my family have died. And it's wonderful to hear people eulogize the person, because you can always tell when the person was known or what that person has done is known. It's a big difference. And when the person is known and appreciated, the eulogy is just so uplifting. I mean, in the end of the day, oh wow, look at how, and good old Bob, look at how many times he did this in life, he whatever. I mean, in eulogizing just what I did in life. But who was the man? Who was he? Right? Well, this man is given to what he does, not who he is. And so he says, there is one alone, verse 8, and there is not a second, yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor, neither is his eye satisfied with riches, neither saith he, for whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? In other words, he's completely given himself to this thought of working to save up, to have more, so that maybe someday I'll be able to bless somebody. He's one. It says here one, and in fact, my translation said there is one alone. Alone is in italics because it doesn't exist in the manuscript. It's just given to better help the reading, but it should just read, there is one and not a second. It's describing the person who does not have family, is not married, does not have children, doesn't even have siblings, parents are dead, completely given to profession and what he does, earning, keeping, and what does he do it for? He never stops to ask, for whom do I labor? What is the point in all this? It's one thing if you're a man and you're saying, I'm going out to work today and every day of the week because I want to provide for my family. And I want to give a good life to my wife and my kids, and I want to do them right. Because as it says in the New Testament, the man who does not provide for his family is denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. And we should be those men in the home that seek to provide for our family, seek to, as best we can. We don't have to think about, I got to have millions and all that. No, it's just, we're providing for our family. There's food, there's shelter, there's clothing. We're taking care, and more, and not just in the material, also in more importantly, the spiritual. Because truthfully, there are just situations where the man, for whatever reason, can't get work, is on very low income or below the poverty level, whatever, but does his best to lead his family to the Lord, and therein is his work, and that's wonderful. So there's this person, though, that gives himself completely, wholeheartedly to his work. And perhaps there was even a time when he had people in his life. He says, well, maybe I'll do it for them. But even still, the real reason was just to work, to work. And we have to be careful of that. It's so easy to get caught up in our work that we overlook our family. It's just so easy. Especially, not all jobs are difficult to leave at work. Some jobs are more difficult to do. Some jobs, you carry it with you all the time, everywhere you go. It's in your heart, on your mind, and it's almost impossible to not talk about it, think about it, mull things over, and it consumes you. And it takes a lot of discipline. And I would say you can keep me in prayer for that, because ministry is that kind of work. You carry it wherever you go. Paul even talked about how he carried the care of all the churches. And it was something that was on his heart all the time. It was something that was present every moment of the day. But there has to be that realization that I have other people, little ones, and my wife. And I have to be able to separate those things so that I can completely focus on them. And so that's been a struggle for me. And I confess that to you. It's been an absolute struggle for me over the years. And my wife has patiently suffered alongside of me for that. And my children as well. And you can pray for me. Pray for my family for that. I ask you. And consider ministers as well, other ministers that you know, and pray for them. Because it is difficult. We need to be able to practice this where we can just trust the Lord for everything, go home and just be with our family and the Lord and nobody else. It's very important. I don't want my kids eulogizing me and saying, well, he was a good pastor. I wish I knew him as a dad. Or my wife saying the same. I wish I knew him as a husband. We have to be careful. It can happen to us. So these things are the problem. And all of these things that we just looked at create a lonely situation. They push people away instead of bring people in. But then as he goes from verse 8 to 9, there becomes this, hey, instead of loneliness, let's practice friendliness. Now, of course, these verses are very commonly in every marriage that I've officiated. Every wedding I've officiated, I've read these verses in. It's part of my wedding sermon. The first wedding I did back in New York, I sat down and I wrote a sermon, and that sermon has been my pattern for every other wedding that I've done since. I customize it to the couple and things like that, but generally I stick to the same. And the verses, they usually never change, unless there's special requests from the couples or something is just really upon my heart. And these verses always get in there, and they are read to speak of marriage, coming together. Two are better than one. You guys get the picture right away. And then especially verse 12, and if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. We always reference the three or the third cord as Christ. When you put Christ in the center of your marriage, intertwined with him, your marriage will not fail. Your relationship will only get stronger and stronger. Just like when you take one string, it's only so strong. You pair it up with another string, it's stronger. It can hold more weight. It'll survive under pressure better. Then you braid it together with a third string, and then it's, the strength just is even greater. And that's the idea. Come together under Christ. And it's true. If you take two pieces of rope, you can't really braid them. You could twist them. You could twist them together and knot them at the end, and but a third, then you could really braid them, and then there's a true cohesion between all those things. So you add Christ into your marriage, and that's what happens. There's a real coming together and being one. So, but how do we look at this when we consider friendliness? His whole premise is stated in verse 9. Two are better than one. And that is a biblical premise. That is a very true statement. Why do I know that? Because in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, God said so. He, after his week of creation, after every single day, he said, behold, it is good. But after creating man, and man being alone, was the first time that God said, it's not good that man should be alone. It's not good alone. Now, to be alone is different than loneliness. So I think what God is referring to there is the loneliness. It's not necessarily bad to be alone. You need alone time. You need to get away and be with the Lord, and that's important. So, but loneliness is being with people and still feeling like you're all alone. There's a big difference there. Lonesomeness is also different. Lonesome is like, I'm traveling away for a month and I'm going to miss my family, but it's a very fixed term kind of thing. It's not a permanent thing, and you know that the end is coming, and so you're lonesome during that time you're away, but the end is coming. It's not so bad. You could deal with it. But it's not good that man should be alone, so that he's lonely, so that he doesn't have companionship. God saw that. God knows our need for companionship. We absolutely need it. And I really don't see how, there are, especially as Christians, I just don't understand this, not wanting to fellowship, not wanting to be part of a church, not wanting to commit and really be involved and plugged in and get to know people. It's dangerous, because God designed you for fellowship, first and foremost with him, but then with other humans. It's so important, and most importantly, with other believing humans, with other faith-filled humans. It's so important. So that's his premise. It's not good to be alone. Two are better than one. He starts there. And then he starts to state kind of the reasons. And then he says, because they have a good reward for their labor. They have literally, they profit more for being together in life. And it taken literally, you think of actually, monetary gain. You put two incomes together, you have more money than one. I mean, it's obvious. You have two people working the fields in the ancient agrarian society. You can harvest more in a day than with one person working, right? So their profit is greater. Their reward in life is greater. Two people are, paying the bills and the mortgage, the electric, the the food bill, and all those things. It lightens the load. It spreads the load on more shoulders. And so life is more doable. Even just the pressures of those things, just to share the pressures of those things with another person, the reward is greater. It's just better situation. And so you have a good reward. And so companionship, we see firstly, there's in cooperation with other people, you become more profitable. Now, you guys all understand, I'm not constraining this verse to the marriage relationship, right? You guys followed me there. I brought up the whole marriage thing, and I probably didn't mention that. Now, off of the marriage topic, just think as an individual having friendships, relationships, companionships with people, cooperation with people. You're going to be a more profitable network of people, brothers and sisters. Doing something together, you will be more profitable than doing it alone. Mari and I, we came to Finland, I could say alone. Of course we were together. But I was advised by a man who discipled me to go to the Bible college in Hungary and stay there for a year or year and a half and build a team to come with us and to do it with a team. Looking back upon that, and we didn't do that. I just didn't feel it was, not because I thought it was bad advice, just I felt like God was leading us to just go straight to Finland and get going. And that's what we did. If we ever go somewhere else, though, I would want to bring a team. And I would hope to bring some people from this church. That would be really great. It would be really great to go and plant another church, if we ever do it again, with a team of like-minded people, so that we have, we went for the first almost 3 years without any worship in any of our Bible study service, because we just didn't have, I couldn't play anything back then, sing anything back then. I could, we could have played a CD player and sang along to that, but I just felt that was a little bit awkward. So we just, we prayed and studied the word and prayed more and fellowshipped. So there's no mandate that in your church services you must have worship. We were working towards that, but you guys get my point. It would be nice though to have a team where there's a worship leader on it right from the start, right? You start the Bible studies and we're going to have worship and we're going to have, all that stuff. Or to have an evangelist on your team, or to have somebody who's really just committed to prayer and discipleship, just people with different giftings and abilities, and you go out, and so it's not like you're doing everything. You're just, you are the discipler, you are the pastor, you are the evangelist, and you are the wannabe musician. You are everything, So, it is, I relate to this. When I read this, I'm thinking, if we ever go out again. And I'm so thankful that now we have a great team here. You know, and it might feel a little fragmented because we're not always coming together. We don't have weekly meetings, monthly meetings, whatever. But God has formed a team here in this church where people are serving. They're putting their hearts and hands into the work of the ministry. And man, I see the profitableness in it, the fruitfulness in it. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. But then verse 10, he gives another reason for companionship. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he hath not another to help him. Here's a contingency. You know, you have this whole idea of reward, as it says in verse 9. Now you have contingency stated in verse 10. You know, for if they fall. Who plans on falling? Anybody? You have it written there in your, schedule for the day, 1:35 p.m. I'm going to fall. Darn, I don't have a companion. Nobody plans on falling. You might have a plan for your day, but I guarantee you it does not include falling. I guarantee that. So what's the thing? Mark Walsh used to always say to me, the 7 P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Excuse my French. I shouldn't have said the sorry about that. But you get the point. You could say proper prior planning prevents pitifully poor performance. There we go. There's a Christianized version of that. Sorry. It slips out. And it's true. Proper prior planning does prevent horrible performance. But man, you don't plan to fall. Of all your planning, you don't plan to fall. So what do you need on top of your plan A? You need a plan B, which we call contingency. And that's going to be my companion. If it goes wrong, I'm just going to say, man, help me. Right? And that's what we do in life. We go through life and we're like, we don't plan on falling. And when we do, who do we look to? Our friends, our family, those that are our companions in life. And you know what? They should be there so that when we fall and make a fool of ourselves, they don't come there to really just tell us that, man, you've really done yourself in. No, they just pull us up. They dust us off and get us going again. Because it's going to happen. And fall, you could take it literally. Yeah. Just think of a disabled person. Caretaker goes out for groceries or something, and the disabled person falls. What happens? He or she lies there on the ground screaming for help because they can't get up on their own. So 2 are better than 1 in that instance, right? Literally, if you fall, but also metaphorically, if you fall. If we fall into sin, if we fall into the snare of the devil, or if we fall into persecution, whatever it might be, it's good to have companions to help pick you up. And then in 11, another reason, again, if 2 lie together, then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone? And, literally speaking, because in the ancient world, when they would travel, they would stay in these caravansaries, and they would camp out there, and how would they stay warm in the cold night? They would pile up on top of each other, sleep really close to one another, so their body heat was, and if you go into a barn full of cows in the winter, what are the cows doing? Are they all in their own corner? No, they're all together. And I remember, my church had quite a bit of Ukrainian people in it because we rented the building from a Ukrainian church. And so they would, once in a while, they would come to our church services and then just stay for their church service, which was after ours, or something like that. And there was this one precious saint there. He didn't speak English, and his name was Bogdan. And he told a story, he gave testimony of how he grew up in just abject poverty. So that many times in the cold winters, him and his siblings they would have to find a barn where there were animals in and cuddle up with them to stay warm through the night. The body, just the exchange of body heat. When you're all alone, though, you're not going to survive that cold. So, very literally, it makes sense. You stay warmer. Now, I know in our modern day, you're thinking, well, we don't need anybody now to stay warm when we sleep. We got electric blankets, we have heated houses, so we can just be alone. No, but think of it also in the exchange of gifts and talents, strengths and weaknesses. If I'm cold but you're warm, you're strong, I'm weak, I need to come to be with you, And so we see this often in marriage. Many times when the husband's down, the wife is strong and encouraging, and then vice versa. And we're helping pull each other up, keep each other warm. There's that exchange going back and forth of warmth and keeping alive, and so there's that comfort of companionship in verse 11. And now verse 12. The final thing, and if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So here you have this idea of strengthening, reinforcement, bolstering, shoring up, bracing, fortifying in companionship. And this is very important because we have an enemy, the devil, who goes about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. We can't do this on our own, guys. I think it was Charles Spurgeon who gave the analogy when I don't know where I read this or who I heard it from initially, but I think it came from Charles Spurgeon. He was telling a story about two Christian brothers who were sitting and they were musing by the fire, and the coals, the fire kind of died down and there was coals there. And coals are good and hot, man. And by the way, when you cook your sausages over fire, wait till there's coals. Don't cook it over the flame. You get all that smoke on it. It's nasty. You gotta wait till it's just coals, and just from the radiant heat, you cook it nice there. Yeah, that's the way. Anyway, the coals together are very hot. If you pull a single coal out of the fire, though, it very quickly starts to darken. And that's just like us. We will stay in that blazing heat if we're coming together, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, exhorting one another and provoking one another unto love and good works, and so much so as we see the day approaching, because we live in end times. It's particularly dark. It's particularly hard to be a Christian, and of course in maybe different ways than what our beloved apostles had to deal with. We're not being killed for our faith here in Finland, but man, is it hard. It's dark, and it's a subtle darkness. It's an imperceptive darkness. It's not so flagrant and blatant. It's not easy to confront it because it's like shadow boxing almost at times, but it's there, and it's real, and it's discouraging, and it's wearying. We need to come together. We need to fellowship with one another. The problem with this is that in fellowship, we don't always practice by the rules that Christ laid out for us. So that when there is an offense made against me, I would go and talk to that person who offended me and make things right as possible, quickly reconcile, offer forgiveness, move on from it, so that I'm not embittered and then don't want to go and be around Christians anymore. And so many people have gone through that, where they come to church, and truthfully, I mean, it's very sad that you can find very often kinder people at a secular workplace than you can at church. And listen, I'm not excluding our church from this. It's very sad when I see and hear of the heartache that comes from the way people interact with each other here. Maybe there's competitiveness. Maybe there's this, I want to oppress, I want to control, I want to domineer, I want to rule over. Maybe there's this, all these other things that we read of at the top of the chapter which push away people. Listen, let's not be like that. Yeah, I mean, as hard as it might be to humble yourself and say, Lord, forgive me, and please, brother, sister, forgive me, is it really worth holding on to your right position? I don't think so. I mean, and now here, listen, I'm talking about those kinds of offenses that, we're getting on a rabbit trail here, but I could say I could go on all night about the importance of fellowship, but I know that there's always going to be somebody in the crowd, somebody in the room that's going to say, yeah, but when I come to church, I try to talk to this person every time I come, and he or she just looks me up and down and doesn't even say hi to me. And I'm telling you, I don't want to come back to church because every time I come, I got to face that person. And I get it. I understand. There are people that treat me like that. Guess what? I can't skip church. It wouldn't go well. Only Kyle, Yako, they'd probably fire me. So, but no, I'm joking with that. I come to church because I'm called to, and so should you, because you're called to. So if you're offended, nevertheless, come because God calls you. God calls you. He has something for you. He wants to bless you. You will be reinforced, bolstered, shored up, braced, fortified in your faith. But if you separate yourself, you will quickly die out. Spiritually speaking, your spiritual life, of course, you're not going to be damned, but the vibrance of spiritual life will die out. Now, notice the end of verse 12. Companionship comes with a promise of strength, a promise of strength. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. We might be weak, but with God, we are strong. With each other and God, we're strong. Alone, not so much. So may the Lord help us to be friendly. And may we not only have casual contacts, thumbs up kind of relationship, click, thumbs up, oh, my friend. Facebook friendships aren't friendships, okay? Facebook didn't exist when the whole idea of friendship was created. So the one doesn't need the other, and the one does not replace the other. It's not a substitute for the other. In fact, there's a great quote here on loneliness, which I hope I wrote down, because now I've got you all waiting in suspense. Just give me a second. We got time. Loneliness, this is by Warren Wiersbe. Loneliness is a malnutrition of the soul that comes from living off of substitutes. You try to substitute true companionship with whatever. And specifically in this list, we talked about those things that actually repulse people. You try to substitute companionship with, I'm just going to be a professional and dedicate myself to my work and do nothing else in life. I'm going to be, this controlling person and be on top of everything. I'm going to be above everybody. I'm do everything better than anybody around me, right? And you're trying to get what only compassion can actually offer you, or not compassion, companionship can only offer you. And I think this is a very good definition of loneliness. You're trying to substitute, your soul is malnourished, and you're trying to fill it with, if I can just get, 100 likes on this picture post of my little cutie pie, I'll know I'll have friends and my day will be good. Or you post your cutie pie and no one puts a thumbs up. And you're like, why didn't nobody put a thumbs up? Nobody likes me today. It's just so weird. Like, What's going on? So let's not be people who have casual contacts, but let's be people who have few but nevertheless committed relationships. There we will be stronger. Amen? All right, let's pray. And let's in fellowship be nice to each other, okay? No fighting. Lord, thank you for this, your word. Bless us now as we fellowship one with another. Amen. Amen. God bless you.